I'll just say we also got, you have it in your background. I'm showing it right now. We got this poster. Pretty sweet. We've been getting a lot of those this year with the early screenings. But we also got this pin, a IMF pin. I'm
Put it
showing it to
on.
the YouTube.
Put it on.
Oh, doctor. When I see this movie again, I might show up in a suit and put this pin on my suit.
You got to wear it right now. You got to wear the pin right now. We're reviewing Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. You have to wear the pin.
I feel like I have to wear it only on official business.
This is official business. We're talking Tom Cruise.
Okay, put it on.
Thank you, Ricky Flex. So, what we're going to do, right? We're going to jump into the Rotten Tomatoes. We're going to hit you with the IMDb. We'll hit you with a synopsis, and then we're going in with our initial reactions, spoiler free to start. So, Dead Reckoning Part 1 is clocking in at a 98% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. It's then clocking it at a 98% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. IMDb hits an 8.2 out of 10, and the synopsis reads, in Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, Ethan Hunt and his IMF team embark on their most dangerous mission yet to track down a terrifying new weapon that threatens all of humanity before it falls into the wrong hands. With control of the future and the fate of the world at stake, and dark forces from Ethan's past closing in, a deadly race around the globe begins. Confronted by a mysterious, all-powerful enemy, Ethan is forced to consider that nothing can matter more than his mission, not even the lives of those he cares about most. Okay, Ricky Flicks, we already talked about the theater experience a little bit. How about your initial reactions to the film? You leave the theater, what's racing through your mind?
A lot was racing through my mind. I'll just say, start off, I thought this was a great movie. It was a great movie theater experience. Like you said, the fans were riled up. There was clapping, there was yelling, there was laughing all through the IMAX theater. You were on the edge of your seat. The practical action sequences were stunning. Great spectacles throughout the movie. And I thought the ending, not to tease anything and not spoiling anything, it was a perfect part 1 ending in my book. It was almost perfect. It was as close to perfect as you could kind of get in this sort of movie, in this type of villain and movie, I think. So in all, it definitely was satisfying. I think the only thing I would say that's a big hiccup to this movie is the villain problem / story. There is a sort of villain problem. The villain works. It's just not to the level of a Philip Seymour Hoffman in Mission Impossible 3, or in my estimation, a Solomon Lane in Fallout. I really don't think. I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm just saying there is a little problem there, but the overall bigger problem is the story around the villain. And for those that have seen the movie, I think we'll dive into spoilers, but in all, I think that does back it up a little bit, where this isn't even close to Fallout for me, but it's still like one of the best in the franchise.
Okay, well, this is close to Fallout for me. It doesn't quite reach the heights of Fallout in my eyes, but this movie reminded me of John Wick 4 in a lot of ways, where it felt like an action epic. And it has the star in front of you that feels like a rock star, that feels like he is in full control of the audience. When I was like taking notes, like after watching this, it felt like I was watching like Bruce Springsteen, and he has the crowd by his fingertips. And whatever he does, the crowd is going to just go nuts. Whatever Tom Cruise did in this movie, people were like giving rounds of applause in moments throughout the movie. And that's what made the fan experience pretty cool. You felt like you were at a rock show. The crowd reactions, great. The high stakes, the epicness of certain moments in the buildup, I thought was insane. And it felt like the action sequences, we know this isn't the last movie in the franchise, especially because it's a part 1, but it felt like John Wick 4, where the filmmakers and Tom Cruise left everything out there, where they emptied the clip with the action sequences. And you think to yourself after leaving this theater, there is no way they can top this. You just don't feel like it's possible. And this is, to me, top 2 like Tom Cruise performances as Ethan Hunt. He's trying to mix it up a little bit, do a couple things different here. And I disagree. I loved the villains in this movie. And I'll explain why. And it goes more like conceptually than it does by just the performance. It's this franchise is doing something a little bit different here that I thought really, really worked and brought like almost more of a purpose and more of a relevancy to the Mission Impossible franchise, where it feels so otherworldly. It feels like something actually that is very much a part of the culture today, and that's in the conscious of people's minds. I thought it was so sick, so sick. And I think we should talk about Tom Cruise because he is the star of the show. Ethan Hunt, Ricky Flex. How did you think he did in this movie? Do you agree with me when I say like he did something a little bit different here?
I don't like different than like the previous iterations of his character, Ethan Hunt.
Yes. And I can go deeper if you want me to.
I think I see what you're saying, but this movie was a lot denser than other Mission Impossible films. There's a lot more to it, and particularly because of the villain and the overall impossible mission, right, of this one compared to other ones. So I think that's where you're going, and I agree with you in that sense, where we get more out of Cruise with that, and with the new members or new people introduced in this, new characters introduced in this movie, and his chemistry with them, which is very good. So in all, like, I think I agree with you there. But at the end of the day, this movie and Ethan Hunt is still the same Ethan Hunt we've seen the previous three movies, right? It's consistent, where it's focusing on his vulnerabilities as a human, right? He's not that true like spy that they taught in like the IMF training or the CIA training that we probably think that CIA trainings or agents would be. They're just robots, right? There's either assassins or they do the logical, algorithmic type of solutions, right? No, he has intimate relationships that tend to get in the way of him saving the world. And his weakness is his attachment to the people he loves. And that was this movie once again. So I think I see what you're saying, but at the end of the day, this still is the same Ethan Hunt and similar performance, just maybe a little deeper and denser.
Okay, it's not exactly what I was going for. It's more I'm thinking about more like the like humor that he brought to this movie, and also the tributes he makes like to his former films in the franchise. Like he's giving the crowd exactly what they want in a way I don't think he's done before. Like he does things and harkens back to Mission Impossible 1 with like hand deception and tricks. And then he's also like it seems like he recognizes the legend that he has become when he's interacting with like younger people. And this is the oldest I've ever seen Tom Cruise in a movie. Like it obviously is, but he looks way older than these other Mission Impossible movies. It seems like they're reflecting on like his experience, what he's gone through. It just shines through way more. He's not a 60-year-old pretending that he's 30. He's like a 60-year-old who knows he's a legend in this movie. That's why I think it's a little bit different, right? Does that kind of make more sense?
Yeah, all right. So I see what you're saying now. Okay. I agree with you.
And it seems like he was having just so much fun compared to other movies too here. A lot
I
more
agree,
humor.
but I'll go back to Ghost Protocol, Brad Bird directed movie. This for me felt more like a Brad Bird directed movie at times with the comedy. Because I think you are right. This had a lot more comedy, and after digesting it, I should have said this off the top. When I left the theater, I wasn't as all in on all the comedy, but looking back on it a day after, I did enjoy it. I did think it worked very well. So I think you are right in that respect. I think that's a good shout by you. He did seem like to enjoy himself, and I think this movie as a whole also kind of connects with that because you mentioned like the ode to Mission Impossible 1 with the hands when he's like doing the disc, like saying, "Oh, where's the disc?"
The crowd went nuts,
right?
dude.
And he's doing the same thing in this, right, with the key. And there's other like tropes to other Mission Impossible movies, like the close-ups that De Palma did in Mission Impossible 1. They did the same thing with Kittredge here, Henry Shaw or whatever. Sure, I don't know how to pronounce it, but there were the close-ups there. They had a desert storm once again, like Ghost Protocol. They had the trains at a train scene. Again, back to Mission Impossible 1. This one felt like a mix of all the different movies and all the different cruises that we've seen, excluding Mission Impossible 2, which I'm happy about. So I do think you're right. That's a good call by you. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, it's in like Tom Cruise, obviously, to me, once again, the best performer in the movie. We did a throwback review of Fallout earlier in the week to preview Dead Reckoning. And once again, it's just like, this is his world. We're just living in it. But I think there were some really cool additions to this movie that I enjoyed. And specifically, before we get to like the villain with Asai Morales, I want to go to Haley Atwell and Pom Klementif, who plays the supporting roles in this movie. But at times, Haley Atwell almost feels like a co-lead, more so than most other Mission Impossible movies where it's just the Ethan Hunt show. I think Haley Atwell is going to be a freaking superstar after this movie. And she's kind of had a resurgence after Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness returns as Peggy Carter in the MCU, a variant of Peggy Carter where she becomes Captain Carter, where she's like the Captain America of, right, this alternate world. And people were like adoring her comeback. And then we have her here basically going toe to toe, or at least like having, I think, amazing chemistry with an older Tom Cruise and certified rocket. She is so beautiful in this movie. Like she is like up there. She's like rivaling Margot Robbie with me right now. And I think she really can pull off the action sequences. I thought she had a lot more spunk than I thought she had. When we see her, we talked about it when we were leaving the theater. Like she had that likability that was gained from the MCU, and that's really all we really knew her for. But she has like a darker side here, or at least like a side where she's almost can't be trusted. I think she pulled off. And it's not like I'm saying, oh, that's Peggy Carter in my eyes. To me, it's like, nah, she is like fully this next character that we hopefully will see further on in this franchise. I thought she was an excellent addition. I'll stop there because I want to hear your thoughts, and then we'll get to Pom Klementif.
So I agree with you halfway. I think she was amazing. I do think she was really good. Great chemistry with Tom Cruise. Really went toe to toe with Tom Cruise. Like
Yeah.
I am
Like,
confident in saying that.
outsmarting at points.
And
I'm just like good adversary.
yes,
Pretty much.
very very good. So I am I'm like, no spoilers. Big Haley Atwell fan, and the stakes were high with her. All right, little tease there. Very good. Like overall, very good. My one problem is what you said. I disagree. Where I viewed her as Peggy Carter a lot. And that was just like the MCU in me. And by the end of this movie, like I acknowledged she was great, and she did great, and she did nothing wrong to make me say this. But I was just like, how many times are you going to flip back and forth between being good and bad? Like I just, it really got me at points, and it was annoying at times for me. And for someone I was viewing as Peggy Carter, it really got me a little bit. So again, nothing wrong with the performance. I just think the way the 2 hour 40-minute runtime, and how many times she snip snap snip snap snip snap snip snap, literally at least 4 times, it did get to me. So that's my only negative, I would say. Nothing with the performance, just more the character choice by McQuarrie and the other writer here.
Yeah, I can see the writing of the character getting a bit annoying, but I think she just absolutely slayed the role. Absolutely,
she is sexy. Like she didn't dress
she
sexy.
Brings it in this
like, but
movie,
she's
dude.
like she's dressed like formal most of the but she's just sexy. She has that like screen presence of sexiness and charm, and just also that like that seriousness, that like snarliness a little bit too, to go with Cruise, and that's why where the chemistry comes in as a good adversary. So just the overall package. And again, everyone knows here, like Tom Cruise is one of my favorite actors on the planet. Always has been. Maybe my favorite, my goat, not goat, but like my favorite. But she did go toe to toe with him, and I was very impressed.
Yeah, and she passed with the physicality of the role too. Like when you are like doing these stunts alongside like Tom Cruise, you really have to prove yourself. And like you might think that the relationship is going to be like more father-daughter between an elder Cruise and a younger like Haley Atwell. But here it's, hey, there is something steamy. It just goes into the tropes of the Mission Impossible franchise, where the newcomer has that tension with sexual tension with the Tom Cruise, and it makes for very interesting dynamics in the movie. Yeah, go ahead.
But I'll just mention too, like that's why like Ethan Hunt, like ever since this new iteration of the franchise, ever since Ghost Protocol, right? He doesn't like, as far as we know, he does not have sex, or like he doesn't fall like Rebecca, Ilsa's character, like he falls in love with, but like they don't even kiss like at all in any of the movies. Like
Mhm.
they hug in two of them. Like they don't actually kiss. Like he just ever since Mission Impossible 3, obviously what happened with Julia, like he doesn't want to commit himself to someone and put them at risk because he puts everyone else's lives ahead of his own. And that's what makes him different, and also his vulnerability, his weakness. And what it also does that no one talks about is what also separates him from James Bond. And I think it's so good because James Bond, it's like, all right, who's James Bond having sex with this time? Who's the Bond girl? Right?
And then he
Like,
forgets about her a lot of time too.
yeah, like
Yeah.
he's saving the world, but he also has to like have sex and like fall in love, not fall in love, but like, just be James Bond,
He's got to
the
get his.
suave guy. Ethan Hunt's like, I need to save the world and protect my friends, protect the ones I love. And
Yeah.
that's what differentiates himself from the other action franchises. And I love that about Ethan Hunt.
Yeah, total unselfishness. Total
Right.
unselfishness. And then Palm Clementif, I wanted to talk about because she was a newcomer. I loved her character in this primarily because it was kind of a different take on like the action star, the supporting character, like the person that has minimal lines of dialogue, that's this imposing presence, usually male. Here, they make it this mysterious Palm Clementif figure, and that is a total badass. Like the scenes in Venice where she is going down steps in a freaking Hummer, tearing down anything that is in her way. Her going also physically toe to toe against Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt. And I thought she just really killed that role as that extra villain who also is just, there's so much there's this ominous shadow surrounding her. And it's just someone that Palm Clementif, we obviously know as Mantis, also from the MCU. We haven't seen her do very much after that. I think after this, like there's going to be a lot of like action movie options for her. Maybe she didn't do as much in terms of like emotionally or through much dialogue, but she definitely has an on-screen presence. Just when I think about those club scenes where she's wearing the mask, I'm like, yeah. I'm like, that is what you want out of an action movie. You want people like getting really deep into their character, just not saying anything, got the white paint over their face, knowing I'm going to mess you up if you challenge me. I think she had the on-screen presence here. I'm glad to see her in the franchise.
Totally agree. I don't want to repeat anything you said because I think you summed it up perfectly. What I'll just add to that is that it's the classic like henchman to the bad guy, right? So not a lot of like actual acting to do besides the actual action sequences, right? But she
Mhm.
also had like the presence there, I would say, for like a silent assassin, literally silent assassin.
Yeah.
So she nailed the part.
It's like a
Now it's
John
like,
Wick type of part, honestly.
right. But like, I would say Mantis is like really like as Mantis, she's really good at acting. So I would love to see like Mission Impossible. This is the role, the henchwoman role. I would love to see next steps, either her own type of spinoff, like a ballerina, like Ana de Armas, or just go back to acting post MCU, right? Because Guardians, I don't know, maybe she will. We'll never know with the MCU what they're gonna do, bring people back or not. But I would love to see her in a more dominant role in whatever movie she does next, whether it's an action movie or whatever. Because I do think she was great in this. She's great as Mantis. I would love to see her take a next step. And this was definitely a next step to kind of get that next step.
Yeah, it's a slow build. It's a slow
Yeah.
build, and that's okay. Like she'll get there. I think we should also bring up Esai Morales. It might be Esai. I think it's Esai Morales. He plays Gabriel, the villain of this story. And now, I guess we won't go into too much regarding like his, like him and like what goes around with his character and him going against Tom Cruise. But I thought he was an effective villain. I think definitely upper echelon Mission Impossible villain. I don't know if it says that much because this franchise isn't really known for its villains, but I think he did a superb job for what he was given. There was some, I guess the way his character was written, I had some issues with it, and I think there's a lot of questions left to be answered. I think that's what they could explore and they should explore in part two. There's definitely more to be done there, but I kept getting this idea because he's working with this theme of artificial intelligence, which is so relevant in the world today, and how he knows every single detail about every person he comes across, and he can predict, right, like an algorithm, what's going to happen in the future. And by having that, there's like an inevitability that he like brings across the table, where he's like, doesn't matter what you do, I am going to stop you, or I am going to meet you at some point. Like, it's almost like I think of the Thanos meme where he says, I am inevitable. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. It's going to happen literally the way I say it. Like, to me, there was just an overconfidence with him that I loved. And he almost looked like a Bond villain the way he was dressed. He wasn't, I guess, I don't know how you typically think of what a Mission Impossible villain looks like, but he definitely looked like a Bond villain, or just like a hybrid of James Bond himself. You know, really clean cut dude. I thought he was awesome.
I felt he would have been a good Bond villain in this movie. I
Yeah.
totally agree with you. But I'll also just mention that he was the perfect casting for this movie. Um,
Mhm.
I I was a little skeptical, not because of his abilities, but because if we remember, he's Dell in Ozark season one, right? And
Yeah.
he's like the commander, like he's the lieutenant or the second in command, right? So I was thinking heading into this movie or before the trailer and a couple of his lines of the dialogue as like he's the big bad in a Mission Impossible movie. Like that's kind of a big step. Like I kind of would rather have like a Giancarlo Esposito, right? Because I would use that as a comp for SI Morales, like Giancarlo. And I think in this movie, very like I think effective, but to a greater extent. Like he was awesome, I thought. And he did the action sequences
Yeah.
brilliantly,
He's
I
a
thought.
fit dude as
Like
well. Like,
he's
he can
good,
do the hand to hand.
believable, right? Hand to hand combat, very believable in that. And again, I no spoilers, he was perfect. And just think of Dow and Ozark. That's basically him in this, but on a grander, bigger scale. And I
Yeah.
loved it.
I love how he's always he wasn't even like one step ahead. He's always like three steps ahead. And that has to do with like this theme of artificial intelligence. And this is something that I loved about this movie. It feels like the plot in Mission Impossible is relatively the same throughout, whether it's like a rival spy organization or an anti IMF similar to the Syndicate, or it's like a plot where it's like this foreign terrorist wants to grab some nuclear bombs or nuclear weapons of some sort. Here it's like, let's take on more real world themes. And to me, it's because it felt like, hey, this isn't too out of the realm of possibility compared to some of the other plots of Mission Impossible movies. I took it more seriously and I was more scared. I don't know if you felt that same way, but I was like, wow, like this is actually really scary with all the conversation. It felt really timely to have an AI themed villain in a Mission Impossible movie. No?
I was nervous it was gonna be too meta, but I think if I like play this back to like Ghost Protocol days and they used this type of villain in Ghost Protocol, I would have like rolled my eyes, I think. But now it's like, yeah, it's actually kind of believable because of everything that's happened over the past 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So, like, yes, maybe it was a little too meta, but at the same time, I think it works. And I think it works more than it would have 10 years earlier.
And they shot this movie like a couple years ago. No, so it's
Yeah,
like,
like this movie was supposed to come out, I think 2020, and then the second one was supposed to come out 2021 or 21, 22. It was one of those. And now part two is only 40% done. But
to
they,
me, there's like almost a little bit of a coincidence that like AI is at the full like the focal point of like conversation right now and just public discourse, and it's just like, wow, this couldn't line up any more perfectly.
yeah, I honestly think they were probably nervous. Like if I was Macquarie, probably nervous about like the meta-ness of this AI boom right now. But again, I think it works. I think there's other things that don't work related to it, but not the actual premise of the AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Okay. I think also I want to kind of slide over and talk about something that we've been like hailing this movie since we started to talk about it. Obviously, you can tell we're jacked up from it, but I want to talk about the pacing a little bit because this goes into one of my early flaws that we're going to be going into. They're going to discuss. I thought this is a movie that's 2 hours and 43 minutes. This is a action epic, right? For theaters. I think the first 80% of the movie, it felt like I chugged 6 Red Bulls and then I went through action sequence to action sequence. The pacing, it felt like the movie was moving along briskly. And then around that 80% marker, it felt like I crashed because I had so much sugar. I felt like I hit an absolute wall for a little bit going into the third act. And there was a part where Tom Cruise actually kind of leaves the movie a little bit. And that's where I think the pacing really slowed it down. And that's when I really felt the runtime. But then at the very end of the movie, I felt like I drank a seventh Red Bull or drank a seventh and eighth Red Bull. And all of a sudden I'm back on the horse, just like Tom Cruise in the beginning of the film. Right. So I just think you did hit a wall towards the end of this and you felt the runtime. But other than that, pretty well done with the pacing here.
Yeah, I agree that the pacing for the first two acts was unbelievable. The practical action set pieces just go one after the other, right? And it's amazing how fast it seemed like the first 2 hours flew by, right? I think we're like this versus like a Fallout, right? Fallout is like very similar, but the thing where Fallout does better is like executing on the story and making it more balanced with the action set pieces. This one's just like more like you mentioned with John Wick 4 a little bit. Like this is just like throwing all the action at you, throw you all the adrenaline, all the Red Bulls, drink them all up in those 2 hours. Then you kind of get tired. So I don't think I hit a wall. I just kind of got tired a little bit because I was kind of confused. I was really trying to focus on like the story. At the end of the day, it is a Mission Impossible movie. You get the premise, but they really were trying to sell you on this story and this plot and the Gabriel's backstory. And there's a lot of repetitive dialogue about the plot to try to explain what's going on. And it was a lot at times. So you got kind of tired going into that third act. Mm-hmm. But then when the big set piece happens, which I think you all can think about in the trailer, what it is, it's like, all right, we're back on here. Get the shot of adrenaline, and then you're just wake back up and you're ready to go. Just like Mission Impossible 3, when Ethan Hunt dies and Julia has to basically make him come alive again. That's kind of how it felt like right when that set piece came, because then the rest of the movie was awesome and a great ending. So yes, you're right. Hit a wall, got tired, whatever phrasing you want to use, and whatever the reason why, it did kind of hit that part at the beginning of the third act.
Yeah, after that short stint without Cruise, once he pops back on, he does his thing. I felt like Mia Wallace just getting stabbed in the chest by John Travolta.
That's a good example.
I literally jumped out of my seat, and all of a sudden the crowd's clapping again. We're like, okay, we ride. Okay. Where else do we want to go here, Ricky Flicks? I think also those action sequences in the beginning of the film, or at least the first two acts, when you didn't have that constant action, you had some really compelling scenes and things that were really satisfying for Mission Impossible fans, like Kittredge coming back for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. You had the one-on-one with Tom Cruise that the fans are just like, despite no action going on at the time, they're just licking their chops because it's like, when's the last time we had this type of conversation between these two characters, right? And those who are deeply rooted in the franchise, it's just a great moment to have. And leading into the opening credits, we'll talk about it more in the spoilers, but that was the loudest ovation we got when it led into the opening credits. It's absolutely hilarious too. The crowd was cackling at the moment, and that's where you knew like, oh, we might get a little bit more humor here. But also what made this movie so good pacing wise at the beginning is that you had great convo and banter between the squad, right? Some of the best in recent movies between Simon Pegg, Ving Rhames, and a Tom Cruise. I thought Ving Rhames, this is the best he's been in a Mission Impossible movie in quite some time, right? Where he's not just a face that has a couple lines. This was his moment to shine. Who is the villain of this? It's artificial intelligence. This is like Ving Rhames' specialty as Luther, right? It gave him a chance to shine. And he has a monologue in here that I thought absolutely hit. It was him basically giving a pep talk to Tom Cruise saying, hey, this is how we have to approach this situation. We have to outsmart the AI. And when he did that, I was jacked up. When's the last time Luther said something and you got absolutely fired up during one of these films? I thought he brought it this movie. I was really proud of him because you're still relevant, bro. We still need you. You're still part of this team. I thought he was great.
I'll just mention, I think this is like that was the best monologue he's gotten to get you riled up, but his emotional touch in Fallout really gets you. Like it does. He's explaining to Rebecca Ferguson, Ilsa's character, about Julia, and then the bomb.
Down to Ethan Hunt chicks. He's like, I gotta tell you, he had a wife.
And then like Julia comes to the bomb, and then he goes Julia, and like in the earpiece, it's like Simon Pegg and Elsa going, why? What is she doing there? And then she asks to help, and then Luther's just like, where else is she gonna go?
He sounds like a sad dog,
So the emotional touch, let's not forget, but you're right. Like that monologue when he's like, don't forget the mission. You always forget the mission, usually. This time, you cannot. And for non spoiler reasons, we will not say what happened before, but you cannot forget the mission.
When Luther has those moments, like you feel the stakes are higher because like he needs to like make sure that Tom Cruise, Ethan Hunt, like master of all like secret agents, it is locked in, right? And he gives him that pep talk. He is like the dad who calls time out and brings his kid out of the batter's box to tell him like, hey, make sure you lay off this pitch, right? Make sure you lay off, look for yours, take the first strike. That's what we're talking about with Luther to Tom Cruise here. I thought he's great. And also very funny. I thought one of the best sequences is the airport sequence when they're going back and forth. That was also just the humor was freaking hitting. And what made this movie also great is aside from the banter, the action sequences, they let those talk. They let the action sequences be the humor. And that's when this franchise is hitting. And when you force some of the jokes through the dialogue, like they do it in Rogue Nation when I was rewatching it today, it's just a little bit cringy. And you just it's an action movie. It's like John Wick's very good at this. Let the physical action take the wheel, right? We don't need Tom Cruise trying to be a stand-up comedian. Let's do what he's good at and make it funny, you know?
Yeah, I think Ghost Protocol and Fallout do a great job of that. We mentioned the Fallout review, or I mentioned the Fallout review. Like my favorite set piece or sequence was when he's running in London and then he's in the office building. And then he's like, I'm jumping out of a building.
Yeah.
Right? Like, stuff like that. Like in Ghost Protocol when he's hanging on the Abu Dhabi hotel. Like it's stuff like that. Like they let the action do the comedy. That's what it is. This isn't a comedy franchise. This is an action franchise mixed in with some comedy. And
you're not the MCU. Don't be
right. It's not the MCU. Yes, Doctor. That is a great point. So yes, I love that point. And this movie did hit at those. Again, like I thought coming out of the theater, this was like one of those Rogue Nation where it was like I thought they kind of forced the comedy at times. But looking back a day later, I'm glad we did this, not an instant reaction. I think I'm very more receptive to it now. I will have to see it again, but I'm much more receptive to it 24 hours later.
Okay. Yes, it seems like we're relatively on the same page. I think we got to talk about a couple flaws of this movie because we're going to get to the Mission Impossible rankings. A little hint. It will not be the top ranked Mission Impossible movie in my eyes. It certainly doesn't sound like it's going to be in Ricky's eyes. There was a couple things I found wrong about this movie. I mentioned the pacing a little bit towards the end of the film. You really felt the runtime, but I think also you have a lot of new characters here. I brought up two that I found the most enjoyable with a Palm Clementif and a Haley Atwell, but then you have the CIA agents with Shea Wiggum and his partner, Carrie Elwes. If some points of this movie you felt like there was just too much going on, honestly. It felt like Ethan Hunt's doing this action sequence, right? He's going against Gabriel or he's trying to play a cat and mouse game with Haley Atwell. And then you have to eventually show that these two CIA agents are on his ass. And it felt like it's a reminder that they're there, but are they bringing too much to the table? Is it really integral? Is there a rivalry that we don't know about between the Shea Wiggum character and Ethan Hunt? It just felt like you added that element into the movie where I don't think you really needed it. I don't think it provided much. And I don't think the writing of the Shea Wiggum character really made sense by the end of the movie. A lot of these storylines are kind of underdeveloped, especially when we're harkening back once again to like Ethan Hunt's past. And despite them harkening back to the past, we still don't really know what happened. It's super vague. And once again, I think they use part 2 as a crutch a little bit, where they're going to explain away some of these things.
Like you can say that about Gabriel's backstory, the villain AI entity's story, a lot of confusing things there. But going back to Shea Wiggum, okay? First things first. I do think he's a very good actor. Everything he's in, he's always good.
He's good at what he does.
Yes, he's very good, formidable, consistent, reliable, I think is the word.
Great cop actor.
Yeah, and funny story, I was listening to an interview with Christopher McQuarrie saying that Shea Wiggum went up to him at a dinner party and said, hey, I love Mission Impossible. Can I be in the next Mission Impossible? And McQuarrie's like, yeah, like, let me see. And he called Tom Cruise after the dinner party and they wrote in a part for him. And this was it, obviously. But I also want to mention another positive before I kind of go back to what you were saying is I think it's Greg Tarzan Davis, his partner. And he's Top Gun Maverick, the guy who like when he like goes up in the air and he passes out. I do think he was good in this too. I really don't have any qualms with any performances in this movie. I think everyone's great. I just think you do not believe for 1 second that the Shea Wiggum character, right? Again, seems like a cop, not a CIA agent, a guy that's sent down to hunt Ethan Hunt. Like you don't believe it at all. Yes, you believe he's a cop. You just don't believe that the CIA who would send the best of the best, like a Henry Cavill, to go for Ethan Hunt, but they send this guy, right? Mm-hmm. Who's not athletic, who's out of breath after runs. Like it's kind of embarrassing. And I honestly think this movie was 2 hours, 40 minutes. And again, I liked them in this movie, but you could have cut them out and it'll be a lot simpler plot going forward.
Like when those two showed up, it was like a by the way. It's like, oh, by the way, they're still here, right? By the way, don't forget about these guys. And then when you have a moment for them to really like have their moment with the audience, they squander it.
But another positive thing from Shea Wiggum here is he had a great introduction to this movie. So Alec Baldwin, right, in Rogue Nation had a great introduction where he's calling Ethan Hunt the living manifestation of destiny.
Yes.
Right? Shea Wiggum had a great line here. All right. A mind-reading, shape-shifting incarnation of chaos. That's Ethan Hunt. That is an unreal line to start, like to introduce his character. Similar to Alec Baldwin. Like
the legend of Ethan Hunt.
That was a great line and help bolster this Mr. Destiny himself, Ethan Hunt, right?
Yeah.
Shape-shifting incarnation of chaos.
That's what he is.
Unreal line.
Yeah. And he's like this unstoppable force. But at the same time, he's kind of underestimated at the beginning of this movie. That's why I love the conversation with Kittredge, because Kittredge is talking about like, this is like the wave of AI. This is like the new age. You are the old. You are like the physicality. When we were moving towards technology, you are going to be forgotten. And it's just the motivation that Ethan Hunt needs and the crowd wants to hear, because we know Tom Cruise is about to kick ass for about 2.5 hours after that conversation. And him beating technology, he's beating anyone physically, but can he outwit, right, as Ethan Hunt? That's what we're looking for into this movie, into part 2. Let's get to scores. Scores for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Ricky Flex, you can go first.
I gave this an 86.
Ricky.
Big story. There are some story problems, like I discussed. There are some story issues.
I think the story issues definitely for individualized cases. I think the overall story worked, overall narrative, but I'm going to give this a 91. This definitely breaks the 90s for me. Doesn't hit the same as Fallout from a review last week, but I think for me, it's pretty high up there for the Mission Impossible franchise, deservedly so.